Hello out there in asynchronous learning land. It's me, Dr. Newman, here with another video on the history of the English language. We're continuing our series on Old English this week. We will be talking in this video about the Old English Lexicon. Lexicon, once again, is one of the levels of linguistic organization, such as syntax, morphology. Lexicon is basically another word for vocabulary. It includes all the words and possible words, and also to a certain extent ways of making words available to a language. And you see here on this first page, we have Old English Lexicon, and I have that in, I don't know if this is accurately translated Old English, because believe it or not, I'm not an Old English specialist. My research in ancient historical English literature has mostly been in Middle English. So if I conjugated Eald and English wrong, then please leave a note in the comments section, and I will give you special access to my members only Discord, which doesn't exist. The word Wordhord is a fun one. This is the Old English word for lexicon or vocabulary. It kind of sounds like what it is. Think of like a dragon's hoard or a treasure hoard, or a big pile of words. On the agenda for this week, it mentions that I'm going to talk about some features of Old English literature, which I am, but I'm not going to have a special video for that. I'm going to kind of integrate it through this video on the lexicon of Old English and on the next video, which is about Old English borrowings and contact between Old English and other languages of the period. So let's start off talking a little bit about literature here with the most famous work of Old English literature, Beowulf, which interestingly enough was not known through much of English literary history through the Middle Ages and Renaissance. It was rediscovered in the 18th century and really didn't make a splash in English literature until the 19th century. But here's a little sample of Old English. Of Beowulf. Himse ildista on swaroda, werodes visa, Wordhord on layak. And here's a mostly literal word for word translation. The most senior, se ildesta, right? You can see the superlative is formed in Old English the same way with the est ending, like oldest. The most senior answered him, on swaroda, answered. You can see it there, right? Werodes visa, the leader of the band, literally the wise one among the manly men, is kind of what that means in a very literal way. He wordhord on layak. He unlocked his word hoard. And this is a way of saying he started to speak, and he was going to give a long speech. And of course, one of the features of a heroic poem like Beowulf is that it's actually 40% speeches, which is similar to the proportion of, say, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey that is made up of speeches. Long speeches are a big part of ancient heroic epic literature, whatever you want to call it. And I want to point out one other feature of the style of Beowulf here, which is apposition. And this is a grammatical stylistic term that refers to two phrases in close succession that modify each other and are described as appositive phrases and are said to be in apposition or apposite to one another. An example is Jonathan Newman, a professor at Missouri State. And this is a common journalistic formula, right? Like, Stephanie Hine, a representative from Southwest Missouri or something like that. And we see other examples of this in Beowulf at the very beginning, where there's a reference to an ancient king, an ancestor to one of the characters in the poem. Shield Chiefson, scourge of many tribes, a wrecker of mead benches. And you can see how those are just placed next to each other to kind of accumulate information. There's a great work on this, on how apposition, putting things next to each other, structures Beowulf both at the level of individual sentences, but also a work as a whole. And that's Fred Robinson's Beowulf in the Appositive Style from 1985. Putting two things next to each other is also how often Old English made new words through a process called compounding. Old English formed new words through compounding more than modern English. There's different kinds of compounds. The most striking kind is what we might call a stem-stem compound. That's a compound we make with two stem words, not with a prefix, which I'll talk about on the next slide. Stem-stem compounds are sometimes called Kennings. And here's an example. The word mode with the ancestor to our word mood in modern English, could refer to heart or mind. So here are some compounds that we find in Old English literature. Wordhord, secret thoughts, the things that you're storing up inside your mind. Modkaru, which is actually, that's supposed to be sorrow, not sorry. But karu is from the word care, so like mind care. Mind love, modlufu, affection. Modkrafty, intelligent. And here we see a compound not of two nouns, but a noun and an adjective. To be crafty is to be skilled, to be cunning, like in modern English, right? And that G would be soft at the end of a word like that. So it wouldn't be pronounced craftig, except maybe very early in the Old English period. It would be modkrafty, which is intelligent. So this is one example of how one stem can make a bunch of different words. Here are a few other examples of compounds. Fella is an adjective meaning many. Frigenda is actually a gerund, I want to say, meaning asking. So many asking, somebody who's inquisitive, asks a lot of questions and subsequently is well informed. Here's one that's a little more what we expect of early Germanic North Sea warrior type people. Edgethrach, which means sword strength. Edge is a blade or a sword or an edge. Thrach is strength. And so this could mean sword strength literally, but it could also refer to war or savage courage or something like that. And these kind of compounds were common in Old English. Names are often made out of compounds. There's a character in Beowulf named Hrothgar, and one of you right now is going, "Hey, that's the mountain in Skyrim." Yeah, they ripped Skyrim rips a lot off of is influenced by early Germanic culture, like the Nords, right? So Hrothgar actually means angry spear. The word gar means spear, which actually survives in modern English as a kind of fish, which is a long, skinny fish that looks like a spear. Same with a pike. A pike is another kind of long, skinny fish, and a pike was another kind of long weapon that was basically like a blade at the end of a pole. Beowulf's father in Beowulf is Echlaf, which means blade love. So there's a guy who likes fighting, I guess. Anyway, this is one way that compounds are formed. Sometimes in all of these cases, you can kind of work out from the combined roots what the word means. But sometimes they're a little more riddling, and the Old English people loved riddling. There's a book called the Exeter Book, which is filled with riddles. And of course, Tolkien features riddles prominently in his book, The Hobbit. And some of his riddles are just taken straight from Old English riddle collections. So, for example, the word wordhord itself is kind of a metaphorical compound, right? It's not literal, but it's kind of figurative. So that means vocabulary. One of my favorite, Hronrada, or as it's translated, whale road, means sea. This is a good one. Banhus, or bone house, is body. Sword sleep is death. That's pretty metal. And here's one that doesn't come from Old English, but from Old Norse, which we'll talk about in the next video. But Old Norse also does this kind of kenning compounds thing. Wind eye is the window. It's the eye in the house through which the wind comes. All right, so another way that compounding is formed is with prefixes and suffixes, which together are called affixes, A-F-F-I-X-E-S. So some of the prefixes will look familiar to you, like for, like foreshadowing we still use this for prefix. For witty is wise. Somebody who is witty is like literally knowing. It's related to wit and wisdom, and things like that. But to be for witty is to be prudent and like looking ahead and to have smarts about the world. In is another prefix that we still use. So that means within or inside. Inwit, right? We see that same stem here is here, wit, which is knowledge, but inwit here is treachery or guile. So it's like you're knowing something inside of you, you're keeping a secret, right? Here's one that has kind of dropped out of modern English, and this is the participial completive prefix ge, or ye. So Modern German still uses this, like geschafft is a business, whereas schaffen is to like do something or shape something. So think on was an Old English verb meaning to think, but thank is something that is thought or a thought. So when you see a at the beginning of an Old English word, it means that it's like an action that's completed. It's kind of a participle, like a past participle type of action, but often it just makes a new noun out of a verb, or a verbal noun, as it's called, when you make a noun out of a verb, and the noun refers in some ways to the action of the verb. Un means exactly what it means in modern English. So untamed is in Old English is untamed or wild. Over, that F would have been voiced between two vowels, means just what it means now. Overdone, overcooked, etc. But sometimes you could make a noun out of it, like overmode. We saw that mode stem already, mind, heart, spirit. And overmode meant pride or arrogance. Let's look at suffixes. These should look familiar. Full, right? Awful, lawful. Why am I blanking on any other word that ends in full? I'm sure you can think of some. Ness, business, kindness, and so on and so forth. It looks the same, it's just spelled a little different. And then same with a leas, which is less. So moodleas, there's that stem again. To be moodless actually means to be sort of dispirited or downhearted or like lacking verve or energy. Moodleas. And then you can put these things together in various ways. So here's a fun one. Ungarad, which means stupidity. This is based on the un prefix, which is a negation, the which is a completive, and then radon, which is counsel, which is to counsel or advised. So onierad means something like unadvisedness or something like that, to a state of not being counseled or advised, which can be translated as stupidity. So this is the end of the talk on compounding, and I want to talk just a little bit about how if you work with Old English at all, sometimes you're going to have what would inaccurately be called false cognates. False cognates is when it's between two cousin languages, but Old English is not a cousin language to modern English. It's an ancestor language. So there has been some change in the meanings of words over time. For example, the word starve in modern English means to die by not getting enough nutrition, to dying of malnutrition. Or it can be used metaphorically to just mean really hungry, like I'm starving. But the word stervan in Old English and Middle English just meant to die. So this is an example of narrowing. The meaning of the word has narrowed. It used to be more general, and now it has a more precise meaning. This is also true of the word deer, which in Old English just meant animal. Like modern German Tier, it also just means beast or animal, which we talked about in the episode on Grimm's Law and Werner's Law, when that D to T changed. In modern English, deer is, of course, the things that run around and you try not to hit when you're driving in your car in the Midwest during certain times of the year. And you also want to look out for ticks so you don't get Lyme's disease. All right, widening is the opposite of narrowing. That's when something that had a narrower meaning gets a more general meaning. So the word aunt in Old English just meant your father's sister. They had different words for your father's and your mother's sister. And in a society where clan life and family life was everything, they had a more precise vocabulary for the things that matter. In modern English, aunt just means any of your parents' sisters. And it can sometimes even be extended in some cases, depending on your family, to like a cousin that you might be particularly close to who's older than you, or like a close family friend or something like that. But originally in Old English just meant your father's sister. We also get the idea of metaphorical extension, where to grasp in Old English only meant I am grabbing this with my hand. But in modern English, we use it to mean to understand something, to grasp it, and actually the Latin word prehendere also means to grasp. So the word comprehend and the word grasp are words that have the same literal meaning and the same figurative extended meaning. This is called a calque, calque, when you have these kind of conceptual translations. We'll talk more about that Then there's just straight up shifts in meaning. It's not a narrowing, it's not widening, it's not extension, it's just a change, and sometimes even a reversal. So in Old English, the word to botch meant to repair, and in modern English, it means to mess it up, to screw it up. Sources of the Old English lexicon this is just a kind of a lead into the next video. But one thing about Old English that's distinctive from Middle English or Modern English is that the lexicon is strikingly Germanic. 97% of the lexicon of Old English is Germanic, as opposed to less than half of it in Modern English. A lot of our other vocabulary comes from mainly French, Greek, and Latin. Latin before Greek, with a few other languages mixed in there. And you can see here, just as a little teaser, some of the differences in the Old English Germanic vocabulary that we've inherited and the Latin Romance. So soul versus spirit, heart versus coronary, and so some of these don't line up perfectly. Mood versus emotion, mind versus mentality. Ghost is Old English or Germanic. Phantom is Latin and Romance. Actually, that comes originally from Greek by way of French, fantôme. Thought is Old English, but idea is Latin in origin. Womb is Old English, and uterus is Latin. Brotherly is Old English, and fraternal is Latin. So as you can see, words that come from Latin and Romance often have a more technical or abstract flavor to them, whereas the Germanic languages, for speakers of English, have a more kind of immediate, effective, everyday kind of feel to them. So that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. And the next video, we're going to talk about some of the effects on Old English from the contact that it did have with other languages, in spite of the fact that only a few of 3% of the lexicon was borrowed from other languages. It was, as we will see, a very significant 3%. So I look forward to joining you. I look forward to you joining me in the next video. Bye.